All right, we are back. This is still Crossfire with Dakbo and Ishoma. And like we promised you before we went on that break, that we're going to be talking about you and your environment. How important is your environment to you? And then there are so many questions in the mind of a lot of Nigerians, especially when we talk about the environment. The physical and the chemical and the biological integrity of our planet is being compromised on a daily basis. The destructive processes are not just continuous, but they evolve even in the quantum and in rates. And that is to have you and I look at how important keeping our environment free of all the dangers that can impose a lot of threat even to our immediate life. We have this gentleman joining us in the studio. He's an environmental person. He is an environmental activist, and he'll be telling us more about his objective and what he does. Let's welcome to the studio as we discuss environment with Mr. Desmond Majekodunmi.
Good morning, sir. And you're welcome.
Good morning, sir.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be in this.
Are you a Nigerian?
Studio. I was born and bred in Lagos.
Wow.
Omo Egba.
You know, I mean, you didn't even. I would have. I expect to hear Omo Egba. You're welcome to the show, sir. Yeah. I mean, talk about environment. I mean, I know that you are an environmental activist, and people will be like, okay, I know about political activist, but you are an environmental activist. What makes you one? Who is an environmental activist?
Well, it's a matter of survival. Because the reality is that we all need to be protectors of the environment. In fact, the reality is that the most important issue that every human being faces, or the most important duty, the most important responsibility for every human being, including both of you here, is to protect the environment. If I could put it another way, I could say, do you realize that protecting the environment is the most important thing that you can do? And before you say yes, I will ask you another question. Now, this other question, you will say no to this other question. And when you have said no to this second question, you will have by default said yes to the first question. So, do you want to hear?
Yes.
Let's have
want to hear this? Yeah. Okay. Can either of you here, even with your cross-firing and throwing missiles and darts and everything, can either of you here hold your breath for 10 minutes unaided?
I'm trying
to.
And if you can, if you feel it.
I can try. I try 40 seconds.
Maybe underwater. Maybe underwater.
Thank God you said no. Now I'm worried about her because if you said yes,
she's from the riverine.
Well, even then, 10 minutes is a long time.
Okay.
And if you said yes, and if she says yes, she can hold her breath for 10 minutes. It means that she is a spirit.
Exactly.
No.
So can you hold your breath for 10 minutes?
Well, on live TV, no.
No. Okay. And then the logical process is, why can you not hold your breath for 10 minutes? Because you need to breathe air. What is it in the air that you need? Oxygen. Where does the oxygen come from? It comes from the chlorophyll process of the leaves in the environment. Oh, so I think that which we cannot survive without for even 10 minutes, is that not the most important thing to protect that resource?
Now, does that mean typically, or just looking at it, does that mean the amount of, the amount of plants we have in our environment is a function of the amount of oxygen that we have?
Fantastic question. Fantastic. Because the research has actually been done by the late Professor Obot, who was the executive director of the NCF, and he researched and he said that each man in his lifetime needs a minimum of 80 to 90 fully mature trees to supply him with the oxygen that he needs. So that's more
huge.
or less the ratio is huge. And that's why, when the earth was created, obviously there's massive amounts of trees and forests and so on. It's only recently, only in the last sort of 100 years, and particularly in the last 30 years, that we've been desecrating and massacring and tearing down these forests, which is a very, very dangerous thing to do. Because these forests are providing us, and she's admitted now, she's not a spirit, And I can assure you,
flesh and blood.
no, definitely she's flesh and blood. I won't touch further than just her.
Right.
Flesh and blood. Yeah. So she also requires oxygen like every other mammalian form of life on this planet. And the oxygen comes as a free gift from the environment, from the trees, from the leaves, from all the green foliage. So we must protect this. And even if it's not just the oxygen, hey, how about water? You know, how long can you go without fresh water? 4 days, 5 days? You know, after a week, you're dead. You're dead. And where does the water come from?
Because I actually heard that you can actually stay longer without food than staying longer with without water.
Exactly.
So I can go hungry without taking food for so many days, but for
then
water,
nothing.
Well, 4 days, 4 5 days. And where does the water come from? It comes from that precipitation system, which is a whole environmental mechanism. It's not just there by chance. The water comes from the evaporation. It comes from evaporation from the sea. It goes up into the atmosphere. It gets blown inland. It condenses. It falls as rain. That rain is now gathered in streams. It gathers underground as aquifers. It now is picked up again by, our friends, the trees. The trees pick up that water. And the transvaporation process, it goes back into the atmosphere. Then it gets blown down. Do you know that there's a forest in Cameroon Cross River that supplies rain to a place in Ghana? It's just because it's located in that particular place. So when the transvaporation, that is when the leaves put out their water vapor, it goes into the sky, and there's a particular current that always blows across. And it carries,
to another country.
So if that forest goes, you have a desert in that place in Ghana. Wow. So the rain and the water is part of the environment. And this is why, even scriptures are very clear. All the major scriptures that man knows, from the Holy Bible to the Holy Quran, to the Bhagavad Gita, to the Buddhist Sutras, they are all telling us one basic thing. Right at the beginning of most of these scriptures is care for the creation. Look after the environment. Because everything we need for our survival comes from the environment. And I know you said we can go without food for a while, but even after 12 hours, my stomach starts rumbling.
Oh, yes.
Can you imagine 12 days?
And then now imagine 12 days.
So we've got to protect the environment.
Can I ask this, please? Now, let's look at Nigeria, for example, and Lagos State, narrowing down to Lagos State, because this is my abode, so I can speak for what I'm seeing and observing. In recent months, the heat of the sun has become so excruciating. Now, could it be that the level of heat we're experiencing in Lagos State, for example, is because we have a decline in the number of trees?
It's not even in Lagos State alone.
It's
I was in Kwara State.
Across Nigeria, but I can speak for Lagos.
Yeah. It's absolutely, well, there's several things coming into play there. Part of it is the global warming that our planet Earth has been subjected to, is experiencing. And that's been going on for the last few decades now. And that global warming is raising the average temperature slightly. But, when you have a hot climate and then it goes just a little bit hotter, you really feel it. And then to exacerbate it is the lack of vegetation, the lack of trees. Because definitely the trees will be giving the shading effect. Definitely the trees will be giving that little bit of extra moisture into the environment. And if you want to test it, the Nigerian Conservation Foundation, on whose council I sit, whose president...
Yeah, we'll still be talking about the NCF.
Yeah, if you go to the Lekki Conservation Center that they have just opposite Chevron roundabout there, you just go under the canopy there and the temperature just drops, boom, like that. So definitely it has something to do with it. The removal of all the vegetation and the climate change that has been a result of the global warming is exacerbating the situation in Lagos, in Kwara, and all over the country, particularly in the north.
Now, let me come to talk about, the very importance of having to take care of our environment, especially when it has to do with maintaining trees and all of that. But when I was growing up, when I was a child, I still saw, I was still privileged to see a lot of trees all around. But today, houses are built in those places, and that's because, the economy is growing, the population is growing, and so we need to create space for people to live without really minding that the essence of the human living is subjected to the trees that you are even getting rid of to build houses.
Yes, but interestingly enough, this is not a really new knowledge. We've known this for a long time. And this is why when we set up our entity called Nigeria, within the infrastructure or the structure of Nigeria, we had massive, large forest reserves all over the country, spread around all over the country. Dozens and dozens and dozens of reserves. And these are areas that should have been left untouched. But unfortunately for us,
development caught up with those...
It was even worse than that. The development that caught up was the bullet took over from the ballot. The bullet took over from the ballot. And when you remove the people's voice, which was the ballot, because in those days, the people's voice was heard, so there was also types of discrepancies and misrepresentation, but at least the people's voice was heard, and then the bullet came in and took over from the ballot, and the people no longer had a voice, so government was no longer accountable to the voice of the people. Yes, and we all know what happened. We all know the terrible decline. I was born and bred in this country, and I saw the birth of a great and wonderful nation called Nigeria, whose founding fathers were so happy and so proud and so determined to make her a great nation. And then that bloody day came when they massacred the prime minister, and they shot several of his ministers, and they killed several people, and the bullet now took over, and the bullet continued, and the bullet continued, and massacres started, and terrible things happened, and then the war came, and the bullet continued, and the power of the bullet totally disenfranchised the people, so that the people had no voice again. So things like game reserve. Which one is game reserve? When I'm a military ruler, I'm in charge of the situation now. This forest, what do people reserve in the place? Go in there. It's a decree. You don't even make decree. Just give order. Give order. Take over that forest and sell the wood there. Make sure that you give me my share. And this is what was happening. And if the people try to raise their voice, you get shut up. Yes, yes. And then the goggled monster came along, and the thing just got from bad to worse to very, very terrible. Because when the bullet takes over from the ballot, the people have no voice. So the voice of the people could no longer protect these wonderful reserves. And we had wonderful reserves all over the place. These reserves had a role to play, and that role was to ensure that the forests were kept intact, and also the animals that lived in those forests were kept preserved. Now the forests have been desecrated. Nigeria has gone from 35% forest cover to around 7 to 6%.
Wow.
Yeah!
That's such a huge decline.
That's a wow. That's a big, big wow. When you consider that the forest is what the lungs, especially the tropical forest. The forest are the lungs of the earth. This is Mother Earth's lungs. This is how she gives her children the most valuable, the most essential commodity that they require, which is oxygen. And then apart from that, as we said earlier, what are the forests doing? They're the relay runners for the rain. They're carrying the rain all the way from Cross River to Ghana. Then they're doing all sorts of other things as well, man. Ooh, the fruit. You can't tell me that you haven't eaten some sweet ogbono soup.
Definitely.
She looks like an ogbonomite.
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah, amongst many, many other things
that we can eat.
Forest.
I mean, seriously speaking, sir, I know that you're very passionate about conservation right now. Is there anything that the government of Nigeria today, are there policies to restore the lost glory when it comes to forestation, when it comes to preservation and conservation of all of these important things that should add up to longevity of a typical Nigerian and our people?
Very, very good question. And in fact, there is. And this is the sad tragedy of our nation, is that we're so blessed and so endowed with so many resources, not least of which is the intellectual resource. We have geniuses. We have people who are great thinkers and innovators. And talking about the environment, over almost 5 years ago now, Senator Grace Bent was the chairman of the Environment Committee in the House of Senate. And having appreciated that there was a looming problem called climate change, which was, really, really a major issue globally, she formulated this wonderful, wonderful document on policy, a policy.
Or a bill, as it were.
It was a bill. It was called the Climate Change Bill. And it was one of the most modern environmental policies of any country. And what it was advocating for was the setting up of an environment change committee, a board, which would be multi-ministerial. So Ministry of Environment would be there, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Finance, you name it, a multi-sectoral climate change commission, to protect the environment, and which would also, and this is where there was a problem, because this is the Climate Change Commission. How do you see there was a problem? The Climate Change Commission would have had oversight over what they call the Ecology Fund, which is, I think it's about 3% of our GDP. It's a massive, we're talking of billions of naira, which is supposed to go towards protecting, the environment for ecological problems.
Protecting the ones that are left and probably planting
Thank
more.
you, Ecology Fund. But the operative word there is supposed to go. Okay? So this Climate Change Commission, this environment watchdog body would have been looking after the Ecology Fund. The bill was presented to the presidency at that time. The president it was passed in both the House. The president didn't sign it. It was brought back again. It's now going to be re-represented to the president, the incoming president. And luckily for us, I was deeply touched and quite moved when I heard that in his acceptance speech, one of the speeches he gave right after receiving the nod, receiving the green flag. Yeah, he said environment. He said climate change is going to be one of the issues that he's going to be looking at.
That's
so
very
definitely this has to be represented.
Well, anyway, it is very important dealing with all the environmental issues in Nigeria with a bid to enhancing a positive care for our health. And that has to do with this generation and even the generation unborn. We will go on a short break now, and then when we come back, we will still be talking about you and the Nigerian environment. We'll be right back.